ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדברו. It's an episode I spoke about already in the Bible, that after Moses went up to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, the Word of God, and the Ten Commandments, by the way, were heard by the Jewish people from the mouth of God, so to speak, the first two. But then they said to Moses, please speak to us because we are very much afraid of the sound of that voice. And the other 8 commandments were already enunciated by Moses. But then again, he didn't return to the midst of the Jewish people. They thought he was about to return, and then he was taking too long. And they thought that Moses had disappeared. So they went to Aaron, they said, you have to do something about it, because something terrible has happened to Moses. And they insisted, and they built a golden calf. And the golden calf was not really a substitute for God. According to many of our interpreters of the Bible, they think it was a substitute for Moses. They're saying, this is the one that took you out of Egypt. Moses took you out of Egypt. It was really this golden calf. God says to Moses, when that happens, go down, take a look what you people have done. And Moses comes down holding the tablets of the law, and he sees the Hebrews dancing with fervor, with emotion, circling a golden calf. That's idolatry. In his ire, he took the tablets of the law, threw them on the floor, and they were broken. And afterwards, he had to do another set of tablets in order to give testimony to the Word of God. Our ancestors were dancing around this golden calf, and that was a terrible sin. Maybe it's a sin for which we still have to pay today. I really don't know. I'm not very clear. Our rabbis say that happened on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th day of Av, the same day when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. In other words, it left a vestige. It left a terrible shadow upon the history of the Jewish people. But then afterwards, God says, you know what? Build a tabernacle for me. Build a house for me in the desert. And they did one that was transported with them throughout the years they were in the desert. According to some, that was a replica, not a replica, but symbolically it represented Mount Sinai. They were leaving Mount Sinai toward the promised land, but it was going to take them 40 years to get there. And this tabernacle, this building, sort of reminded them of the presence of God. But God says, build me a tabernacle and I will reside among you. Our rabbis keep on saying, you know, it says, I will reside among you, the people, not in the tabernacle. Well, that is an interpretation, a fine interpretation of the verse in the Bible. But it basically means God is going to live in the tabernacle. He's going to be in the tabernacle. When Shlomo, the king of Israel, Solomon, built the Beit HaMikdash, he was the son of David. David couldn't build it because he was a warrior. And he who really used the sword to kill people could not build a house of peace. But he had planned it already. So Solomon is the one that built it. And on the day when he builds it, when it's finished, he says, how is it possible that a building, that a house can contain God? That is not possible. God is everywhere. How is that possible? Well, what was the Mishkan then? The Mishkan was going to be the house of God. Well, up until that time, God had appeared always on heights. You know, Mount Moriah, Mount Sinai, manna came from heaven. Everything was upstairs. Now, God was going to be downstairs. You know what? Mishkan comes from the same root as the word shachen. Shachen means neighbor. God was going to be your neighbor. The idea was, you know, we have a contradiction. God cannot be contained in any building. But on the other hand, he resides somehow here also. But the idea is that he's not up there. He's not outside of our daily doings. He is a neighbor. He is like us. He is next to us, and he has a house. He is confined to it. He has to take care of it. In a sense, it gave proximity to the Jewish people with God, that he is right next to them, that he's not going to leave them. But there's also another very important difference. Up until that point, God gave. God sent 10 plagues upon the Egyptians. He split the Red Sea. He made manna come down from heaven. He gave them all the time the means to be able to live, to be able to go through this long journey in the desert. Suddenly, God says something else. You know what? I need your contribution. I want you to give gold, silver that you took out of Egypt, linens, whatever is necessary, and build this Mishkan. I want you to do it. And as a matter of fact, when it came to the building of the Aron HaKodesh, the box in which the 10 Commandments would be placed, everybody participated in building that. A different concept. From God giving, suddenly God is asking. What does that mean? I think that when you receive, maybe you're grateful, I'm not saying no. But when you give, I think you establish a closer proximity. You identify more with the person, the object, the idea toward which you're contributing. I have the custom of, in the visor of my car, I maintain dollar bills. And when I get to a red light and suddenly somebody extends his hand, it's very difficult for me sitting in the car to try to reach for some money in one of my pockets. But it's easy on the visor. I take out $1 and I give it to him. And I say, I hope you're well. And he looks at me and he says, thank you very much, because I addressed him. Not so much, I think, because I gave him something, because I said a word to him. I'm giving part of myself to him. I'm making him feel that he is important also. I think that when you contribute, you really come closer to something. God had given all the time to the Jewish people, but now he said, I want you to give as well. That made the Jewish people closer to God. So how am I going to resolve the fact that God cannot be contained in an edifice, in a construction? God is everywhere, and on the other hand, I'm building a tabernacle in the desert and later on a Beit HaMikdash. Well, who says that this world does not have contradictions? The ideas that I don't understand 100%, yet each facet of the idea brings a certain message. I somehow, as a human, I identify with a synagogue. I feel God's presence more in the synagogue than anywhere else, because I'm elevating my prayers. I'm trying to communicate to him. Can God be in the synagogue? I don't know. But on the other hand, life is full of contradictions. As long as these contradictions bring you closer to spiritual matters, I think they're important for the human species.